welcome to the weekly assignment, which hopefully you were tuning into because it's Monday morning. And this is when Sam and I talk to you about what's coming up on Lincoln Square this week, the latest headlines, and of course, what we can all do to fight back against authoritarianism. Coming up this morning, we have Skye Perryman, who is the president and CEO of Democracy Forward. She's going to discuss all of the group's many lawsuits against the Trump administration, including the $1.776 billion slush fund that they have successfully halted. But first, Sam, let's talk a little bit about Trump. He is in excellent health, if you saw some of the headlines. That's according to his latest physical. Of course, Trump was nice enough to grade himself and gave himself glowing reviews. I guess this would be a good example of what they call grade inflation. But, look, we've all seen the hand bruises. They're on both hands now, the leg swelling. Even the health report written acknowledges that he has a few extra pounds to lose. But, Sam, when I saw the headlines, and there were many of them, most of them got that excellent health quote from the doctor in. And this is just classic propaganda 101. That's the headline they want. That's the headline that people who aren't paying obsessive attention, they'll read and they'll be like, oh, he's old. He's fat, but the doctor says he's in good health, so everything's cool. Unlike that Joe Biden guy that, clearly wasn't doing so well. Of course, for you and I, who unfortunately have to watch all of the meetings with Trump and the press conferences, and we see him falling asleep, we know he's not in great health. But once again, Trump is great at trying to control the narrative.
Yeah, I was really curious about all of this and wanted to talk to you about it as someone who's run newsrooms and who's dealt with reporting. And, James Fallows, a legendary journalist, has said, look, there's this other secretive layer of news in newsrooms, the people who write the headlines, and they are sort of unaccountable to anyone in these, the journalists are doing great work. So I'm curious about your take on all of this, because is it that they think we're all on the same page? We all know that he's not well, and so the headline is just doesn't need to continue saying that, or what is happening in newsrooms?
So, I think there's a difference between how headlines get written at the major news outlets that are still really well staffed and they actually do have people who are dedicated to writing headlines for them, unlike smaller newsrooms that I have run or Lincoln Square, where usually headlines are going to be written by the Post author. And so they tend to be a little more accurate, I feel like, when you actually know the source material. But in this case, the easiest way to write a headline is to take a direct quote. And that's why you're like, well, it'll be really accurate. And, then I don't have to worry because nobody wants threats of a lawsuit or angry PR people, even though, that's the job, is to tell the truth and to sometimes deal with people who are very pissed off at you for telling the truth. But when it comes to Trump, he gets the benefit of the doubt the way so many other people don't. If the exact same health report were issued about Joe Biden, you would not see a flood of headlines about him in excellent health. If any doctor said that, they'd be like, this is crap. This guy is clearly spinning or outrightly lying. We know he's not doing well. But, Trump has been able to browbeat so many media executives and owners that want their mergers approved. And you see ridiculous coverage like this, even though Trump still complains about the press right and left.
I want to talk more about this after we talk to Skye Perryman, who's with us now.
Oh, perfect.
So put a pin in that, because I have another question for you. But let's bring in Skye, because what she has to say is really important.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here, Skye. If for those of you who have not seen Skye on many of our shows before, she is the CEO and president of Democracy Forward that does the work of the angels and sues the Trump administration over all of their corruption, including that slush fund. So thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I always love joining you guys.
Great. Well, I know you had a big success at the end of last week where for now, that $1.77 billion slush fund that's supposed to go out to Trump's political allies and, January 6ers, that has been put on hold. So talk to us about the latest with this case and where the fight is going now.
Well, thank you so much for having me on to talk about it. This is something that I know you all have heard, the same thing we've heard. People across the ideological spectrum are so upset at the slush fund. We are hearing from people all over the map politically about the concerns here. So we brought a lawsuit on behalf of a very diverse coalition. The coalition included a former career prosecutor that worked on the January 6th case, reproductive health care professionals who go to work every day and are threatened by people that seek to violently restrain access to clinics. And many of those folks have been convicted under the FACE Act, this federal act that prohibits that type of violence and restraint, but the fund says that it will compensate, people that pled guilty to that or that were convicted. The city of New Haven, that's been targeted by the government as a result of its policies with respect to immigration, and Common Cause, a great group that you guys know about that does voting and pro-democracy work. And then an individual who participated in a protest and was jailed. He ended up being acquitted, but he was charged in this country for protesting. And so this is like such a diverse coalition that I think really represents all of the people that stand to be very harmed by this fund, because it is it's a slush fund. We know it's very corrupt. I'll get to that in a minute, but it's also a fund that is very specifically, targeting people, and very specifically is available, they say, for folks to apply to get money if they believe they've been a victim of, quote, Democrat, this is their words, not mine, Democrat weaponization of government, without any acknowledgement, of course, of this administration and retribution agenda. So in addition to our case, of course, CREW, a great organization, has brought a case, as well as the Public Integrity Project on behalf of the Capitol Police officers from January 6th. So you have a very broad coalition here. And what happened was the DOJ does what it just totally overreached. Not only is the fund completely unlawful, there's no authority for it, but we just made a very basic and reasonable request that the DOJ agree that it would not do anything regarding the fund until the courts could look at the question of the fund's legality. And they refused to agree to that, refused to preserve the status quo. And so what you had on Friday was a federal judge in Virginia early Friday morning say there can be issue an order, an injunction, say there can be nothing that results from the operation of this fund happening until we can look at the legality of it and have a hearing. And so that was a really, I think, important victory, important first step to preserve the status quo while the courts can consider the legality, and telling that the administration really wants no accountability. They don't even want to pause their actions to have a court. If they really feel confident in the legality of their fund, then why won't they go let the courts rule on it? But they don't feel confident, and they don't want any accountability. And then the other update, of course, is later in the day on Friday, the judge in Florida, that original IRS case that Donald Trump found, answered a motion that 35 federal judges across the ideological spectrum filed earlier in the week that said, Judge, you should really take a closer look at this case, because this seems to have been frivolous, baseless litigation that was done under false pretenses in order to, quote, have this settlement. That's not how litigation functions in this country. That's not how the courts are functioning. And that motion provides a pathway for the court to consider whether Trump family and Trump committed fraud on the court. And so the court on Friday suggested that she wanted to hear from the government on that point on the same day that we'll have our hearing in our case.
So we've seen that Chuck Schumer and the Democrats have vowed to fight this fund. We're even hearing that a lot of Republicans are telling the White House privately that they should drop this. I guess trying to give a fund to people who beat up cops on January 6th may even be unpopular with some Republicans. Talk to us about that. Do you think that there will be enough of a revolt from Congress to stop this fund in addition to the actions that you're taking in the courts?
I mean, we certainly hope so. I mean, you're hearing from the people all across the spectrum, of course. Everyone knows this is unlawful. It's totally corrupt and it's an abuse of power. I want to be very clear that there's no authority for the fund. There's no authority for the way in which they have described that it would operate. It violates multiple provisions of the Constitution, multiple provisions of federal law. So we will take care of that in court. But I think the hope, of course, is that the people, and is what the courts are really doing, is slowing this down. So you have to preserve the status quo, and that this outrage continues to build, and that the president does feel pressure to abandon it. This is an administration that is responsive at times to public pressure. They're not impervious to public pressure. It is an administration, as we say, that you have to confront them directly. You have to have the courage to confront their unlawful actions directly. But more often than not, when you do that, you see them bob and weave, back off, pull things back. And so, my sincere hope is that over this next 2 weeks, as we are waiting and preparing for the hearing in our case, as the judge in Florida is, going to hear the government's response to these concerns around fraud on the court, that people, including people in the president's own party, force this White House to back out of it because, again, they're going to lose. And so I think the question is just how long they prolong that. And the court of public opinion is stacked against the president here.
It's so dumb that we have to do this, right? It is just dumb that you have to burn all of your energy in these kinds of cases. But I am curious your take on if you would rather win in court or if you would rather he gives up.
I mean, look, we know we're going to win in court, but I will say this about we have won, quote unquote, many times over the past year and a half because the administration has been forced to abandon their plans and their unlawful activity in the face of litigation and in the face of public pushback. These things are interconnected. We filed our case because the people wanted to speak out. A broad, diverse coalition of people who are harmed. It was time for them to push back and to say, you have to stop this harm to me. We're going to be very injured. That is a power that people in this country have. But we all have that power, even if we don't go to court or even if we're not the ones that are specifically harmed by a particular action. And so we always like to see that pushback. I think you will see it. Now, the thing that is so troubling is the way in which the president clearly owns, and I say this non-politically, but clearly sort of appears to own and operate the entire Republican establishment. I mean, it was encouraging to hear that some Senate Republicans pushed back on Todd Blanche when he went to the Hill, but we haven't seen people in that party put their country over their party with very limited exceptions. And so, I think it would be the right thing for the country for them to do that. Whether they will have the courage to do it remains to be seen. But I think that there is a lot of public pressure on this. I mean, even people that used to support the president, they're very upset about it. They know something that's unlawful and corrupt when they see it. And that's what we're seeing here.
Skye, I know Democracy Forward has filed dozens of lawsuits against the Trump administration.
Hundreds. Yes.
Hundreds. Okay. So everything from DOGE to the federal spending freeze, the ICE raids in houses of worship, the Slush fund, and more. Can you update us on some of your other cases? Because I know you've had a lot of success.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have a lot of success, and there are times when we have setbacks in the court that being in court really empowered people to think about new ways to solve problems. So we've largely had so much success in the courts. Some examples and some things to be watching. We've secured 2 federal court orders that said that the administration, when they pulled back that sensitive locations policy and said that, churches and houses of worship are up for grabs with indiscriminate immigration enforcement. We've had 2 federal courts. We filed 2 cases. We had 2 federal courts grant the relief we asked for, blocking, finding that it was likely unlawful that what the administration did. And then one of those cases is on appeal at the 4th Circuit. Our team just argued that case recently. I think you'll see an opinion soon, but just that is a clear place where a broad, diverse coalition came together and has been able to really make some changes. We just sued recently on, and I know if you have folks that tune in that are part of the nursing profession, you've seen that the Department of Education is trying to undermine entire professions, entire sort of schools of curricula. So we were very pleased to represent a number of national nursing organizations in challenging that. The state AGs also have a challenge there as well. So that is definitely something to watch. Remember that we have a lot of these cases where we're seeking to get documents from the government. We have not forgotten the Epstein, we've not forgotten the Epstein files, and we're engaged in active litigation right now to force the government to turn over the communications in the government, not the Epstein files, but the communications between all the actors about why they delayed, why they aren't turning these over. So we are confident that we'll be able to see some great things there. On the elections front, which we know so many people are concerned about, we are actively litigating against, we've exposed that DOGE took Social Security data and we believe misappropriated it. And some of that has some implications for the election. So we're actively pursuing discovery in that case and aggressively pursuing that. And then we have a number of other election protection cases. So those are just some of the ones to look at. But I will tell you, I mean, not a week goes by that we're not getting some type of positive court order. Usually in these cases, the president is facing over 750 lawsuits altogether between us and other organizations in the state AGs. He's losing 70 to 80% of the time in court. Less than 5% of those cases, even with him wanting to go to the Supreme Court every 2 minutes on the emergency docket, less than 5% of those cases go. And so that should help people see that the courts are not perfect and they're not going to save this country. People are, but the courts are a huge part of buying the people time, of protecting our rights while we do the work we have to do as individual citizens.
Skye, I know that you were only able to join us briefly this morning because you have to go back and fight the good fight. But we will look forward to having you on again because you always give us not just a great update on where all these cases stand, but you also give us hope, which we desperately need in these times. So thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. And I think for folks that are tuning in, just look at this. I mean, we don't know what fundamentally is going to happen. We're confident, but we'll have to continue to fight this day by day. But sometimes what you have to do in this moment is look a threat straight in the eye. Don't blink, confront it, and, use community. These are communities that have come together that are very diverse. Use community to find that courage to go in and confront it. And we're really pleased that we've been able to stop this unlawful activity, at least for now.
I definitely want to have you back to talk about the pivot that we have to make when he's out of office, because I'm sure you've been thinking about that.
We're all over it. And, this is really a time we get to reimagine now. It's not about rebuilding. It's not about rebuilding an old system that wasn't delivering for people. It's about reimagining the democracy at 250 years that this country has never achieved, but that we can achieve together. And man, there's such an opportunity to do that. So I would love to come back and talk about our Democracy Works 250. See, we want democracy to work for the next 250 years for all people. Our Democracy Works 250 project. And then I'd love to come back later on in the summer when my book comes out, which is all about what ordinary people can do in extraordinary times. So that'll be a fun time to have a conversation too.
1000%. Anytime.
Thank you guys. All right. Bye-bye.
Hope. Like there's hope.
There is. And, I know that we spend so much time talking about the Supreme Court because they're always doing horrific things. But when you look at how the courts really have held beyond, besides the Supreme Court, and so few cases actually do go before them, it does give you hope. There have been so many successes for Crew and Democracy Forward and so many other groups that have been fighting the Trump administration on their completely illegal agenda.
Yeah, I wanted to read this quote or this message from the chat from AJ North. If we are to have another contest in the near future of our national existence, I predict that the dividing line will not be Mason and Dixon's, but between patriotism and intelligence on the one side and superstition, ambition, and ignorance on the other. That's from U.S. Grant. It's great. And here we are.
Indeed, we are. And then, we have Trump that's telling us, don't believe your very eyes. I'm in excellent health.
Yeah. Well, so this is the question I wanted to ask before. And for those of you who are just tuning in, earlier before Skye Perryman came on, we were talking about headlines, news, and stories, and how newspapers and particularly larger mainstream media outlets spin stories based on quotes they get from the source, right? So I think about this, the story that we're reading, it says, Trump says he's in excellent health. The bruises on his hands, the doctor says from shake. That's not the story. The health isn't right. The checkup and the quotes, those aren't the stories, right? The story is the story that we had during Biden, that he's actually unwell. He's objectively not well. And so the story is that they're lying to us. Why isn't that reflected in the headline?
Yeah. And this is an administration, a guy who lies to us constantly. So it's not like he needs the benefit of the doubt. We have dating back to 2015 with him being on the presidential stage. And long before that, this is a guy who lies a lot. And so why wouldn't he be lying about this? Why wouldn't a doctor who nobody has probably ever heard of before, why wouldn't he be ensnared in this the way so many of Trump's other allies are in lying for him? And, when you listen to medical experts, that you see on CNN or MS Now, they're raising questions like Dr. Jonathan Reiner. Like, for instance, most of us who are not 79 years old and overweight and have bruises on their hands, most of us go in for an annual physical. This is his second annual physical in the last year. Why is that?
Annual. And Maxine Hunter in the chat. Hey, Maxine, I got your email. I'll respond later. My emails tell me he's sick, or my eyes tell me he's sick. This is the thing, right? That I've read all of these articles, and when they quote those other doctors who come in and say, look, this dude's not well, and we're concerned about his swollen legs, we're concerned about the weird bruising, we're concerned about this, he falls asleep all the time, all of this stuff, those doctors get the qualification, these doctors who have never examined him and admit that they may be totally wrong, right? Mm-hmm. But the doctor who did examine him and gave him, said he was strong as a bull, is not held up to any kind of standard.
Right. And let's remember back in 2020, right before the election, when Donald Trump got COVID, and with reporting since then, by reporters who withheld some of their reporting for their books, we learned that he was far sicker than it was ever disclosed. I remember watching those press conferences, and it was clearly a dog and pony show. The man was hauled out of the White House on a helicopter, was not able to breathe on his own. And so we have a long history of lies about the president's health. And now, if you look at Donald Trump on any given day, you cannot mistake him for the guy he was on the campaign trail in 2016 or even in 2020. He has gotten markedly older. His ankles are swollen. He's bragging about cognitive tests. Most of us don't have to take cognitive tests unless the doctors are worried that something might be wrong. And so, it's who are you going to believe? Him, his doctor, or your lying eyes? And we don't need to help him with headlines the way so much of the mainstream press has.
That's it. I mean, to me, this is a media story, right? And I think that, like, look, whether he's ill or not is kind of beside the point to me, because he's a shit president, right? When he's well.
Like, there's a reason why Joe Biden didn't end up running for president in 2024,
right?
Because enough people said, hey, we need a president who can do the job. If you watch him in press conferences, where he loses thought, where he falls asleep, this is not a guy who's up to the job. And he's starting wars all over the globe, and he's crashing the economy. It's kind of bad that he's not up for the job.
And so I think, like, and my point is really that he's never been up for the job since, he came down the escalator. He was not up for the job then. He's not up for the job now. He's gotten better at grifting. He's gotten better at screwing all of us and all of these kinds of things. However, an unwell person is less likely to be held accountable for a shit job or for corruption or for committing crimes. And I want to go back to the COVID situation, because here's a guy who was the president of the United States, who very possibly nearly died from COVID and still didn't handle the disease seriously, right? He still did not handle it in a way that took anything seriously. He let the conspiracy theories out of the bag. He also, not only is he president, not only did he almost die, he has arguably the greatest healthcare of any human being on planet Earth.
Right.
He still almost died from this and still allowed RFK Jr. and all the other nut jobs to talk about ivermectin and disinfecting your individual germs and drinking bleach and all of the crazy shit that he did. He's an unserious person, whether he's sick or whether he's not sick. He's not good.
I do want to say one thing, and this will probably be the only time I ever say this. Donald Trump, during his first term, does deserve credit for Operation Warp Speed, which brought us vaccines in record time that saved millions of lives. And, at the very least, he didn't stop that, which he should be commended for. And then the Biden administration that followed deserves credit for implementing it and making sure that everything went according to plan. However, the fact that Donald Trump has now appointed RFK Jr. as his health secretary, he was your loser of the week, not this week, but the week prior, really undoes a lot of that legacy. And unfortunately, that is one of the lasting impacts of COVID in this country, is that quacks like RFK Jr. have such power and cachet over people. However, he did do something right. It's just, now we're all paying the price because he seems to want to desperately make us forget that he did something right, and is now just hell-bent on making bad decision after bad decision, whether it's in Iran or with the economy or this slush fund.
That's 1,000% right. And, his like, oh my God, it could have been the easiest win for him to say, holy shit, I've cured COVID.
Right.
Like,
right.
And then double down.
You deserve an arch. I mean, you don't, but.
No, no. Oh, what a dummy. Just dumb.
But his dumb devoted followers all think it was just one big conspiracy, and he can't have them turn on him. And so he's just going to ignore the best thing the man has ever done in his entire life.
Yeah. It's Herman Jacobs says, has a question in the chat. We could spend 24/7 documenting Trump's criminal insanity, but we become desensitized, which I think is a very fair point. And that's part of his genius. It is the sort of Overton window of what is accepted and what is not accepted. And we've come a long way in the past 10 years. And Herman would like to know how we deal with that. I don't know.
It's an excellent question. I mean, I do have to say that the Trump administration is extremely good at flooding the zone with shit, like Steve Bannon, the phrase he came up with years ago. I mean, if you just look at their social media accounts, it's just constant shit that pisses you off, that isn't true, and it gets inside your head. And you can't say, oh, none of it matters, because putting out white Christian nationalist propaganda from the White House is not something that we can ignore. This isn't just a silly one-off, like the alien photo that we showed a couple weeks ago from China. Okay, we can ignore that. That's idiocy.
Yeah.
But when they're putting forth harmful policies, that drive his deportation agenda, that drives the horrific actions of ICE, no, we can't ignore it. And it's constant. And my hope is that, we can at some point, move on in this country from that kind of continual onslaught of shit, because it does start to drive everyone a little bit nuts. Everybody needs a break, but we can't make the same mistake that we did during the Biden administration, where we're like, oh, things are normal now, let's just turn the page. We need truth and reconciliation commissions. We need to hold people accountable, but getting away from the constant Stephen Miller onslaught of crap would do us all a lot of good.
Well, and it's I think that all of that is a media story, and Herman, that it's a story about what to cover. And when they're coming at you with so much, you do have a responsibility to cover a lot of this stuff. But you have people like Skye Perryman, who is unpackaging all of this stuff and presenting facts under oath and in a setting in which you cannot just bullshit. And that is how you start to do this. And that's the thing, when anytime they're faced with a need for evidence or to present their side truthfully or factually, they quit because they don't have it.
Yeah.
That's it. Truth is
and
what
they lose in court, whether it's the Broadview 6 in Chicago, where DOJ was just making stuff up and they were caught, to any number of the lawsuits that Democracy Forward has brought against DOGE and the administration. So we have to keep fighting them on so many fronts. And yes, it's exhausting, but we're in it for the fight of our democracy. And when you talk with people like Skye Perryman, it does give you hope.
It really does. Yeah, it really, really does.
Yeah. Well, coming up this week, we will have a really great conversation with you, with somebody who knows Donald Trump in a way that very few of us don't. And that is something that I'm sure we're all grateful for, but it's his niece, Mary Trump, who runs a great Substack. She will be on the debut of Stephen Beschloss's new show on Lincoln Square, 6 Questions with Stephen Beschloss. That will be debuting at 7 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. And I really can't wait for this one.
I am super jazzed for this show. We've been developing it for months, and Stephen is such a unique talent. And his voice is calm and steady and so measured, but also he just gets to the sort of base layer of all things. It's like Occam's razor. So I'm really looking forward to this. 6 Questions, I think, will also be a framework that is simple. It is not always the big, expansive 90-minute conversation that we've all become kind of used to. It is a very concise show. I'm super looking forward to this. He's got a couple of banger guests lined up for the following weeks. We're gonna also post these on our as podcasts.
Right.
So you'll be able to subscribe on Apple and Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and you can listen to them in the car, or as I do on the weekends when I am mowing the lawn.
Yes, it's that time of year.
It is.
And another announcement, we will be giving you twice as much Frank Figliuzzi from now on as you were used to. His show is expanding to Mondays as well as on Wednesdays as well. And this is a great chance. Sometimes Frank will have guests on Monday. This week he has Dr. Dominique Rowe-Sepowitz, who will be talking about human trafficking and the World Cup coming to North America and what that means. On Wednesday, Gareth Gore will be on to discuss Opus Dei and the Catholic Church. He's a really fascinating author. But we love having Frank on. He's a former assistant director of the FBI. He knows national security inside and out. And what I love about his show is that, it's not just the same old topics and guests. I mean, when he was talking with me a couple weeks ago and he wrote that column on the World Cup, I mean, he's always looking at the national security angle for so many stories. And I think it gives us a breadth here on Lincoln Square that I love.
Absolutely. I don't know how he does it. I just love, I get to be in the green room for his conversations. Me and Sean, our senior producer, and they end, and I'm like, oh man, that was so good, because it's like sometimes it's like with Bobby Jones, just hearing somebody who's been in the rooms where all of this shit happened is so compelling, and it turns your thinking. Like, you might think about something, but you really don't.
Mm-hmm.
People have spent their careers becoming experts in this, and that's Frank. And by the way, V for Violet says, "Ooh, podcasts," so I won't miss any, even if I miss them. Yes, and I think we're gonna create Frank Figliuzzi as a podcast as well.
Absolutely. We also have our periodic series that's available on podcast, On the Ground with Joe Trippi. That has returned. We had an episode over the weekend. We'll have another one for you this week. Our focus is all on Texas right now, and it couldn't be more apropos with what is going on with the U.S. Senate race between Ken Paxton and James Tallarico. Everybody agrees that this is the shot for Democrats to finally flip this seat, to finally make headway in a state that has been so solidly red for years. And Joe Trippi has worked in Texas. He knows everybody in politics and journalism. And these are the conversations that I love with Joe Trippi. So definitely check that one out too.
Yeah. Speaking of being in the rooms, I mean, like 2 weeks ago on Joe's podcast, he was like, one of the first times I ever talked to Benjamin Netanyahu. And I was like, what did you just say? Benjamin Netanyahu? And then he told a wild story. They're the best stories. I love them.
Yeah. Yep. So that'll be great. And then also this week, I have Zach Roth, a longtime reporter. He and I worked together in State's newsroom. He was our democracy reporter, which, is a beat that I wish more outlets had. Now he's with Democracy Docket with Mark Elias, the great attorney that is also fighting the Trump administration on the election front. He will be on First Draft with me at 11 Eastern on Wednesday. And we will obviously have no shortage of things to talk about, especially with the Postal Service looking to meddle in mail-in voting.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that one. Man, it's a good week.
It is. Yeah, we've got a lot. And we'll probably have more as the week goes on. So feel free to check back at our weekly calendar that we post on Substack, because things are always changing with the news breaking. And then we, of course, try and keep up and post that on social media as well.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Great. Well, this week for our weekly assignment, No Kings is doing something a little bit different. That was our first No Kings rally for Trump's birthday last year on June 14th. Instead of organizing rallies, they're looking at doing an alternative to Trump's concert series, which has imploded. I think we have a look at where the current lineup stands, and there are only like two people standing. What Vanilla Ice is on, and
Trump.
Flo Rida might be there, but everybody else has backed out. People have had the sense that this may not be the most fun concert to participate in. Maybe they're better off going to headline the county fair in Missouri instead. Donald Trump, I guess, thinks he's bigger than Elvis. Maybe he'll just do a rally with his greatest hits, which of course will be a real crowd pleaser for the 70% of the country that doesn't approve of him. But anyway, the folks who brought us No Kings, they're trying to organize their own alternative concert that emphasizes what's great about this country for the last 250 years, what brings us together. And you can organize a watch party or attend one. And I think it's a great alternative. I know Bruce Springsteen also has a much more interesting concert lined up. So, if you don't want to celebrate this president's 80th birthday, what we're saying is you've got a lot of really good alternatives out there.
Yeah, I love the idea of a watch party too, by the way, because, these events need to bring us together, right? That's the beauty of the protests, is that you get to go out and sort of chafe with your neighbors and just see people in person.
Mm-hmm.
Have a watch event. And if you do have a watch event, tell us about it. Take
Yeah.
pictures, send videos. Like, I want to see what you guys are all doing.
Yeah, absolutely. But whatever it is, it'll be so much better, even if it's just you with a few friends, than having to sit through whatever Trump puts on, at the White House.
Oh, God. I mean, those, for Vanilla Ice, the concert, you could think of it as a career ender, but his career is kind of ended already. It is just the punctuation mark at the end of the sentence.
Yeah, I saw somebody cracked a joke on social media about, he'll be there to play all of his hit.
Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, thank you for tuning in. And Sam, it's always fun on a Monday morning. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you, at our many shows this week.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.